He's a retired law professor. He's also a retired assistant state's attorney. He served from 1975 to 2005. During his term, he was the last person to prosecute the notorious, vicious serial killer, Ted Bundy. He's here to talk about that, the book he wrote, and much more. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Calling us from Lake City, Florida, we have George R. Bob Deacle on the phone. Bob, thanks so much for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Show. Very much appreciated.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Bob, by the way, is a retired prosecutor from North Central Florida area. He's also a law professor and author of many books. Before we get into the conversation, it's a fascinating conversation we're talking about. Tell us about your books, where people get more information, the kind of books you've written.
Well, most of the books I've written are books on historic trials. I wrote a book on the Lindbergh kidnapping, wrote a book on Abraham Lincoln's most famous case as a defense attorney. I wrote a professional biography on Lincoln, which I wrote about all of the murder cases that he tried. I've written a couple of books about murder cases that were prosecuted by a prosecutor up in New York City by the name of Francis Wellman. I wrote, of course, a memoir about my involvement in the prosecution of Ted Bundy, and then a couple of textbooks on legal subjects.
You're a busy guy, man. You, since retiring, I think you're probably busier than you were when you were working.
Well, my wife tends to keep me busy.
Good for you. Busy mind is a good mind. It's a clear mind. By the way, yeah. Bob's website is bobdeaklebooks.com. That's B-O-B. Last name spelled D-E-K-L-E. So bobdeaklebooks.com. Of course, I want to talk to you about your long career, but that would take forever. That would take multiple shows. One trial in particular really stands out is the Ted Bundy trial. Lots of people have big misconceptions about Ted Bundy. By the way, Ted was, for those who don't know, in case you're very, very young or just crawled out from under a rock, Ted was a notorious serial killer. And he's supposed to confess to 30 murders and is suspected to have done many, many more. And he was executed in Florida, I believe it was in 1989?
Somewhere along there, yes.
I actually did, at the retirement from police work, I got into radio. And one of the places that I wound up working for about 5 years doing mornings was in Lake City, Florida. It's an area, for those who don't know, it's north of Gainesville, south of the Georgia border. It's a great community. Columbia County is a phenomenal place, some awesome people. But even back, I think it was like 2005, 2006 to 2011, somewhere around there, people were still talking about the murder that Ted Bundy did in Lake City. It had a huge impact on that community.
I don't think that the people of Lake City will ever forget that case.
To refresh people's memories, this was a young woman, a young girl who was was she a high school student?
No, she was a 12-year-old junior high student.
Just 12?
Just 12, yeah. She was kidnapped as she walked across campus, going from one classroom to another. It was during class time. She'd left her pocketbook in her homeroom class, and her homeroom teacher sent a message for her to come get her pocketbook. So she walked across campus to get her pocketbook and walked back, and on the trip back, she just disappeared.
And eventually, Ted Bundy was arrested and charged with her disappearance and her murder? Because she was found, was it a few weeks later?
It was about 2 months later, if my memory serves me correctly, and frequently it doesn't. It was sometime in April that we actually found the body.
This guy, one of the things I think, and I hate to use this term, but it's not a lot of words that really fit accurately. Being retired police, I have a fascination with serial killers because, quite honestly, I never ran into them. I ran into many guys who were contract killers for drug gangs and arrested quite a few of them. But most of the murderers I arrested were people that were spur of the moment, spontaneous, and it was quite often a crime of passion. So when I say fascinated, I'm intrigued by the viciousness and how someone like Ted Bundy can function for so long.
Well, the key to being a successful serial killer is killing strangers. You know, the way most murders are solved is because the killer and the victim are known to each other.
Right.
And so your pool of suspects comes from people who know the victim. As you say, a lot of murders are spur of the moment sort of things, and the killers tend to leave evidence in situations like that. Serial killers are more, I hate to use the word predator types, but they plan out their murders a little bit more, and they tend not to leave as much evidence.
Which makes them very, very hard to capture because, number one, the aspect of not knowing the victim makes it really, really hard. With this young lady, this young girl, she disappeared, and no one knew where she went, and they had no other information in time, did they?
She just walked out of the classroom to go back to her other class and just, might as well have fallen off the face of the earth. She just disappeared, and nobody knew what had happened to her.
I feel so bad for her family. I have 2 daughters. They're young adults now, but you worry about them nonstop, even as young adults. But when they were at that age, if they were missing for 5 or 10 minutes, it was a lifetime. These people went months without knowing what happened to their daughter.
That's right. Now, once Bundy was connected to being in Lake City at the time that she disappeared, it was, pretty much a foregone conclusion or a real great probability that she was dead. The longer we went without finding her, the more certain it was that we were not going to find her alive.
And that's a horrifying feeling. By the way, after a period of time, you begin to suspect the worst case scenario, but you always investigate it as it's a worst case scenario just in case, because you can't go back and start over. So when you have a missing persons case and it looks suspicious, you treat it suspicious from the very beginning until proven otherwise. Same with unattended deaths. You don't treat them as a suicide first. You treat them as a possible homicide until proven otherwise. Am I right?
Exactly. I was involved in investigation of homicides for about 30 years, and I've been on many a death scene. And you start off, everybody's a suspect, and all evidence is relevant.
We're going to take a short break on that note. We are talking about Bob Deagle. Bob is a retired prosecutor, law professor, author of books, and one of the last people to try, or part of the trial team of the notorious serial killer, Ted Bundy. This is Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner, based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, has been in a hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at gunrunnerfilm.com.
Imagine contacting millions of people every month using Facebook from the comfort of your home or business. How much would you increase the success of your business or service if you could do that? I do that every day, and so can you. Plus, earn a separate revenue from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Turn our conversation with Bob Deacle. Bob, by the way, author of many books, one of which is called The Last Murder, the investigation, prosecution, and execution of Ted Bundy. In addition to being a retired law professor, he is a retired assistant state's attorney and part of the trial team that prosecuted Ted Bundy for the last murder of a young girl in Lake City, Florida. About what year was that, Bob?
It was in 1978. The crime occurred on February the 9th of 1978.
Seems like a lifetime ago. It was a long, long time ago.
A long time ago, yes.
But the truth is, the impact of this crime, not just this crime, this guy, and I don't like using his name a lot, but I'm going to use Ted Bundy. He is accused and confessed to killing upwards of 30 people. And a term you used earlier really fits well, and I don't like it either. But there are predatory rapists, predatory serial killers, and many of the predatory rapists, serial rapists, become killers. I've never understood how they think, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, there's just a part of the soul is just not there for that type of a person. They, have a personality disorder called sociopathy or psychopathy that most serial killers have to a greater or lesser degree. And the constellation of characteristics of a sociopath or psychopath are such that they don't. It's not that they don't know the difference between right and wrong. They don't care about the difference between right and wrong. And they look at other people as not human beings, but as objects to be used.
And they're used for their perverse sexual gratification.
Yes. Now, not all sociopaths are that way. There are sociopaths who are in CEOs of companies, but the vast majority of serial killers are sociopaths or psychopaths.
And maybe that's why I really don't understand and comprehend why they do what they do. And I hate to say it this way, but a regular common murderer, I can understand. We say, as a cop, you have a call for a murder just occurred and a suspect escaped on foot, no description. One of the first things I learned to do is try to think like a criminal. Where would I go? What would I do? What area would I head to? Those sort of things can come in very handy until you're dealing with a guy like a Ted Bundy. And those guys, they just don't operate on the same level.
I had a friend who was with the FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit who divided multiple homicides up into three categories, three classes. And the serial killers, mass murderers, and spree killers. And the three types of multiple homicides, serial killers are the hardest to predict, the hardest to detect, and the hardest to prevent.
So much has been made of his supposed high IQ, the fact that in many of the trials in different stages, he represented himself. And a lot of people have gone to great lengths to talk about how handsome and attractive he was. Were those traits that you saw during the trial process of Ted?
Well, he was above average IQ, which makes him a genius for a criminal. But he was not a Hannibal Lecter type intellect by any stretch of the imagination. He is not near as smart as he thought he was, and not nearly as smart as his reputation would have you believe. He's above average intelligence. He knew a little bit about how a courtroom worked, and he, like a lot of other sociopaths, knew how to pour sand into the gears of the criminal justice system.
An attempt to try to manipulate to get things the way he wanted.
Exactly.
I want to backtrack, and I'm glad you cleared that up. Higher than above average intelligence, which makes him a genius for a criminal, because most criminals are not bright. They're really, really not. But he's not a criminal mastermind by any stretch. Is that a fair assessment?
Exactly. You know, people talk about what a wonderful job he did at defending himself. He shot himself in the foot one time after another. Down in Miami, he took over the cross-examination of a crime scene. A guy who worked the scene, the bloody scene at Calmega.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'll go and look, and you can find some of the clips of him conducting the cross-examination, he was doing just exactly what you should not do on cross-examination. If you're defending somebody on a first-degree murder case, he wanted to talk about every drop of blood and every spatter of blood, and went into infinite detail about all the guts and gore and ugliness and whatnot. And, you know, that's not what you want to do if you're a defense attorney.
No, absolutely not. I remember being a witness in court, and of course you have an idea ahead of time. And my limited perspective of whatever case I was involved in, there's certain things I couldn't bring up unless asked. And the state's attorney wasn't allowed to ask them. And then we have inept defense attorneys that would open the door wide open by their line of questioning so that you get the most damning evidence out there. And they're the ones who made it happen. Exactly.
One of the key pieces of evidence that we had against him was a blue blazer that he had been wearing to court. And he got his girlfriend to take it to the dry cleaner for him. And so we seized the coat from the dry cleaner. The problem with seizing the coat from the dry cleaner is, how are you going to prove it belonged to Bundy? How are you going to prove the chain of custody on the coat from Ted Bundy to his girlfriend to the dry cleaner? I didn't want to call the girlfriend because I felt like she was going to try to blurt out something to try to torpedo the case. And so we get to depositions. We take depositions in Florida in criminal cases. They don't do that everywhere. And Bundy's representing himself, and Bundy's deposing the officer who seized the blue blazer. And Bundy repeatedly refers to the blue blazer during the deposition as my blue blazer, my coat, my this, my that. And so when we get to trial, all I have to do is say, well, officer, how do you know that this coat that you seized belongs to Ted Bundy? Well, he told me it belonged to him.
There you go. And he was his own worst advocate. We're talking with Bob Deacle. Bob is a fascinating character with a fascinating story. Many years as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, as a law professor at the University of Florida, and he's part of the trial team that prosecuted successfully the notorious, vicious serial killer Ted Bundy. This is a law enforcement show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
What could you do with an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more? All earned from the comfort of your home or business, and all with Facebook. Meta is paying people just like you every month. They are earning tens of thousands of dollars, and so can you. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
What is the Newsbreak app, and why should you follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app? Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. return our conversation with Bob Deacle, George R. Robert. I guess it Robert Deacle? Is that what we call it, Bob?
George Robert Deacle, go by Bob.
Bob is a retired law professor. He's also a retired U.S. State's Attorney, Assistant State's Attorney, and part of the trial team that prosecuted Ted Bundy for the murder of a 12-year-old in Lake City, Florida, back when he says in 1978 when the murder occurred.
That's correct.
And he was executed, I believe, in 1989, something like that. But
I think that's right.
And I say good riddance. Look, people can talk about life in prison. They can talk about all these other ideological thoughts they have about prison. And while that may apply for a lot of people, when it comes to serial rapists, serial killers, and I believe serial pedophiles, there's no curing those people, and there's no sense keeping them around because the jail staff, the prison staff, all the sociologists, nurses, everybody else has to deal with them, and they're at risk with these people. So he's where he belongs.
I wholeheartedly agree. He is a waste of oxygen.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to get into a discussion because some people think I'm a little harsh, Bob, to be honest with you, when it comes to that. But I want to go back to the case because a lot of people have opinions. A lot of people have their theories. And one thing I don't pay attention to at all is conspiracy theories that people have about murders, because the first thing I'll ask them, were you there? No. Okay. Do you have access to evidence? No. So then you really don't know. But you have access to a lot of evidence. Let's go back and talk about that. How did they link this vicious murder to Ted Bundy? Well,
the first sort of link in the chain was credit cards. Bundy, when he was arrested, had a fistful of credit cards that he'd stolen and was using to buy gasoline, buy food, this, that, and the other. And so they traced him to try to track his movements with those credit cards. And they tracked his movements from Tallahassee to Lake City, and then from Lake City to Jacksonville, where he tried to abduct a young girl in Jacksonville the day before he abducted Kim Leach. And then the trail of credit cards led back to Lake City, where he spent the night in Lake City the night before Kim Leach went missing at a hotel that was just 2 miles from the junior high school. So, that was the first indication that we needed to be looking at him as a possible suspect in her disappearance. And the way that we found Kim's body was by assuming, assume he's the killer. Where did they find the bodies that he's associated with out west? What did the places look like? And we did a kind of a profile of the place where Ted Bundy would hide a body. And so, this is the kind of place that we need to be looking. We also had, as we were out looking in the woods for these various places, had the officers picking up things to be submitted to the crime lab. Anything that looks suspicious, pick it up, send it to the crime lab, and see if they can do something with it. And very early in the case, they found a pile of cigarette butts on the side of a dirt road. And the unique thing about this pile of cigarette butts was there was a $5 bill with the cigarette butts. So, theorizing, Bundy's killed Kim. He's left her body somewhere, and he wants to clean out the car before he goes on. So he dumps the cigarette butts. He's upset, agitated, and he drops a $5 bill. So maybe those are his cigarette butts, and we can tie those cigarette butts to him by fingerprints. So pick up cigarette butts and send them to the lab. Only problem was it was raining that day and did not dry the cigarette butts out and put them in plastic. And by the time the fingerprint man got to examining the cigarette butts, they were mildewed. So he couldn't do any fingerprints on them. But he said, I do this, though. I'll take these cigarette butts, and I will compare them to the cigarette butts that were found in the car Bundy was driving when he got arrested. And he compared the two sets of cigarette butts, type of cigarette butt, length to which they were smoked down, the way they were bitten, and he opined that the same person smoked both groups of cigarette butts. He said, go back to that area and look again.
And this is, by the way, before DNA.
Way before DNA.
So you could have extracted DNA in more recent years from the cigarette butts, more than likely, and done a comparison if you have an idea who the suspect is. You guys, maybe because of prior reputation, maybe because you knew he was wanted for other things in the area, other murders, he was already on your radar, and then you were able to piece it together that way, which I find amazing that the team's able to do that. What I find even more amazing is I know Lake City area, a lot of it is forest area. A lot of it is farmland, is very rural. Once you get out of the city area itself, there are acres and acres and acres of places to hide bodies. Right. Your team was eventually able to find her body, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, we went back to that place where we found the cigarette butts, according as the fingerprint examiner told us to do, and said, okay, let's look around. And we found a place that looked just like the place that Ted Bundy would hide a body. Our picture of where Bundy would hide a body. This is the place. This is, this fits all of the pictures that we've drawn. And not only that, it fit the picture of that a psychic had drawn for us. And so okay, we're hitting on all cylinders. Everything's lining up. The body ought to be here. We'll come back tomorrow morning and we'll look and see if we can find it here. And we came back the next morning. It was late afternoon when we did the reconnoiter. And we came back next morning, and before noon, we had found the body.
The amazing thing is, you guys, I say guys, a lot of people get bent out of shape with that term. That means men and women. When I say the guys I worked with, that's men and women. And part of that team involved everybody. You mentioned that you even used a psychic. That's got to go against your nature, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but when you're desperate, you'll try anything.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. When you have no leads, you especially in a big red ball case like this, you've got to examine every kind of evidence you can. And while that's not enough to get a conviction in court, it can be an investigative tool. I'll give a good example. A lot of people say, well, he passed a polygraph. And I'm like, well, that's not evidence in court. That's an investigative tool. And they don't quite understand the difference. But taking all those things, you built a case. A lot of people misuse this term, too, a circumstantial case, because you didn't have direct evidence, meaning an eyeball witness or a complainant saying this person did that, or fingerprints on the scene. You took a circumstantial case and were able to successfully prosecute this guy.
Exactly. And it was a very complex case. It was taking, pieces of evidence from numerous different locations, placing them together, putting them together.
And we'll take a short break on that note. We were talking with Bob Deacle, part of the team who investigated and prosecuted notorious, vicious serial killer Ted Bundy. This is the Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you want to be a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, simply contact us. It couldn't be easier. You can send us a message on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show page, or email jay@letradio.com. That's JAY@letradio.com.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Back to our conversation with Bob Deacle. Bob is a retired state's attorney in Florida. He's also a retired law professor. He's an author of many books. We'll talk about those in a moment. And he was part of the legal team that investigated and successfully prosecuted the vicious serial killer Ted Bundy for the murder of a 12-year-old in Lake City, Florida. And again, for those who don't know, I mean, this was 1978, but it still impacts that community today. And believe it or not, people may not understand. I'm retired from the Baltimore Police Department. We had so many murders. We had times 300 plus murders a year. And those families, those communities are still impacted. They're impacted by murders that happened 30 years ago. Just because there's a prosecution, conviction, and execution, as in this case, doesn't mean there's closure. There's a term is used a lot. I don't believe there's such a thing as closure for the family members.
There's always a hole where that victim should be. It's there's no real justice.
No, and you're part of the prosecution team. As a police officer, I was involved in many trials. I just had my small part I testify about. We'll stick with murders as an example. And while I felt tremendous pressure at the time, my role was very limited. I can only talk about what I experienced, what I did. That's it. I can't begin to imagine the kind of pressure that's on a prosecutor when you have a horrible serial killer like this on trial with all the celebrity media circus that goes along with it. The pressure on you and your team must have been outrageous.
It was. The one thing that I'm eternally thankful for was this was before CNN, MSNBC, and the 24-hour news cycle, because we had enough trouble with news media without having the wall-to-wall sort of coverage that cases will get today, that high-profile cases get today. I couldn't imagine trying to try the Bundy case today with it.
How long was the trial from start to finish, including your preparation time?
Well, I had a one-case caseload for 2 years in the preparation of the case, preparation pre-trial, and we started the trial in January, early January, just after New Year in Orlando. We got our death penalty recommendation on February the 9th of 1980. So it was about a 6-week trial, 5 or 6 week trial, and it was rather fitting that we got our death recommendation on the 2nd anniversary of Kim's death.
How did you manage to get sleep? I mean, on average, how many hours a day would you put in between preparing for a trial and then preparation after that day?
We didn't get much sleep. During the trial, we'd get up bright and early. We'd go try the case until we ran out of witnesses, and then we'd go back to the hotel, and we'd have witnesses lined up for the next day that we had to prepare. And we prepped the witnesses, and then the next morning we'd go back and do it again. That went on for a month.
And the thing is, you didn't have a smoking gun in this case. You didn't have a direct, and this is a term a lot of people get lost in, you didn't have direct evidence. And I'll repeat myself from earlier. You didn't have an eyewitness saying, I saw him do this, or a victim saying, he did this to me. You didn't have that. So everything was built from circumstantial evidence. And most cases, by the way, are, especially in murder cases. But there had to be a time in there, Bob, where you were like scared to death thinking, I don't know if this is going to go our way. Because these things can get derailed so easily.
Well, it was a case that we could have easily lost. It was a circumstantial evidence case. And the defense, despite Bundy's attempts to sabotage the defense, they put on a pretty good defense. And the foreman of the jury, at the time that the prosecution rested the defense had put up such a good show that the foreman of the jury was ready for them to come forward and offer some proof for the story that they told. And if they had offered a scintilla of proof for the story they told, he would have talked the jury into acquitting.
In your expert opinion, because you've seen evidence and you spent time trying this guy, and how would you describe Ted Bundy? Was he as cold-hearted and as vicious a killer as he's made out to be?
He was a hyena. There's let me think.
Is there not a term that really fits this guy? Is that a good way of saying it?
I'm looking for a word, but I can't think of it to save my life.
That's fine. I kind of get it. Even all these years after retiring from police work, my wife can read it in me, and when I see certain people, it doesn't matter why. There's not that they're waving a big red flag that says, "Hey, look at me, I'm whacked," or "I'm dangerous," or "I'm vicious." You can just tell, and you become aware of it. You became obviously very aware that this guy Ted Bundy was seriously bad business, and he's a violent, vicious killer.
Well, let me say this: I've prosecuted some really dangerous men. I prosecuted a guy who was reputed to be a contract killer for organized crime. Was an airborne trooper, airborne ranger, and supposedly did work for the CIA. And he was kind of a fella who I look at him and my blood would run cold.
Right.
I knew that guy could take me apart with his bare hands and about a half a dozen other people at the same time. He was dangerous. I never felt anything but contempt for Ted Bundy because he could not be dangerous to anybody who was capable of being dangerous back.
Right. He couldn't. He was not a strong, brave man. He picked on people who could not defend themselves. Bob, before we run out of time, I want to thank you for what you've done, and I'm sure that you and your family paid a heavy price even for years after with the scarring that occurs from an event like this. You're now writing a lot of books. Where can people get information about your books and maybe buy some?
Just about all my books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And then you mentioned my website, bobdickelbooks.com. My latest book is about a 19th century Ted Bundy type, a guy who was actually a brilliant medical student who poisoned his wife because she was inconvenient to him. And I am about to publish a second book from about the same time period. The title of it is going to be The East River Ripper, the mysterious 1891 murder of old Shakespeare. And it's a story about a Jack the Ripper type murder that occurred in New York City brothel in 1891. There was some speculation that Jack the Ripper might have done it.
Get more details about these books at bobdiekelbooks.com. That's Bob, D-E-K-L-E books.com. Bob, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
This was a podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. Two simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another great episode of the show. See you then.